from person to person. It's specifically about my thoughts and feelings after I read Thoreau's novel Walden, which I'll talk more about later, and how it changed my perspective on life and nature. It's meant to be an informative speech, so I wanted to make it clear that I'm not trying to persuade anybody to think a certain way. It's purely just how I personally was persuaded by the novel. Rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth. Henry David Thoreau states his deepest sentiments, such as this, in his autobiographical novel Walden. Most of us know Thoreau as one of the greatest writers of the 19th century, or so I thought. As I started reading Walden, I became very interested in what the older generations thought of his work. To my surprise, not a single person I asked had ever read his most famous novel, or even knew anything about Thoreau's life. I find this discouraging considering I have found his novel very eye-opening, and I agree with a lot of what Thoreau has to say. I believe that Thoreau's work can be seen as a wake-up call to those who are engrossed by the constant need for better technology and more money. I asked myself, what would life be like with little to no technology? After researching, I found that many people actually live this way, from the Pocahontas County residents in West Virginia to Diana Savarin, who was inspired by Thoreau's way of life and took to the Kantishna Hills of Alaska. These people prove that not only is living off the basic necessities possible, but it also provides a great quality of life and appreciation for the earth we live on. For those of you who don't know, in 1845, Thoreau decided to escape the constant needs of society and build a cabin on Walden Pond, miles from civilization. He spent 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days living off the basic necessities. He wrote his most famous novel, Walden, describing his experience. Thoreau claims that the basic necessities of life are food, shelter, clothing, and fuel, most of which can be provided by nature itself. It is clear that nature played a major role in Thoreau's experiment, and he took advantage of everything that nature had to offer. He fished and grew his own food. He dug a hole in the ground as a makeshift refrigerator to keep his meat fresh. He built his home with very little manufactured supplies, and he used wood for warmth. He sold his crops to buy only what he needed, and he ended up making a profit after the 2 years were up. This profit was made only by working 6 weeks out of the year. The point of this is that Thoreau did what was necessary to survive. He did not struggle, he did not complain, and he succeeded in his endeavors. Thoreau managed to escape the stressful life of attempting to earn a living, pay bills, and keep up with the constant technological advancements of his time. Rather than being a slave to the money, he defied social standards and looked towards nature for the life he had always wanted. Thoreau's basic necessities were successful for his way of life. That does not mean that everyone would have the same luck with the same basic necessities. One of the common skeptical questions I come by is how Thoreau was able to live without companionship. I wondered this myself, since companionship is important to me, and I do not see myself living without it. He answers this question in his novel. He states, "I find it wholesome to be alone the greater part of the time. To be in company, even with the best, is soon wearisome and dissipating. I love to be alone. I never found the companion that was so companionable as solitude." He is essentially saying that he is able to live without companionship because he had never experienced the kind of companionship that is worth staying in a blinded society for. Instead, he sees solitude itself as the greatest companion. I believe that the more important question would be, what basic necessities work for each individual? What would I need to survive the way that Thoreau did? Some people's necessities could be entirely different from Thoreau's, yet they could still accomplish the same goal that Thoreau did. For example, one could have the basic necessities of food, water, shelter, and companionship. They could be in the exact same environment as Thoreau, but they would have different priorities, all the while still escaping from society and gaining appreciation for Mother Nature. Essentially, what basic necessities fit who you are as an individual? We all know that Thoreau perfected this way of life, but is this still possible in modern day society where technology has nearly taken over our lives? There are actually many groups of people that live this way and thrive in their lifestyles just like Thoreau. An article in Business Insider speaks of the Pocahontas County residents in West Virginia that live entirely technology-free. They decided to live this way in the 1950s when their household items, such as cell phones and microwaves, began interfering with the telescope readings in their observatory. The town is fully functional with schools, houses, businesses, and even a few local doctors that use nothing but natural remedies. Electronics are banned in the 13,000 square mile radius of the town. This may seem a bit extreme for a town of 8,000 people, but the residents have no complaints about their way of life. And some even call the lack of social connectivity a gift because it allows them to interact more with each other face to face. They do not believe that they are at a disadvantage because of their way of life, and they even seem to profit greatly from their small town agriculture and lumber businesses. Sarah Jacobs, the interviewer who wrote the article, claimed that there was an overwhelming sense of community with everyone speaking face to face and being sociable. She also claimed that they had less urgency and more appreciation of one's surroundings. It is incredible to see an entire town give up what most of us can't seem to live without. This may not be as extreme as Thoreau's situation, but these people have similar outlook on life. They do not need the materialistic things in life that are perfectly content with what they have and what they create for themselves without technology. These people live entirely off the grid electronic-wise, and yet they still seem to have an amazing quality of life. Diana Severin also believes that the quality of life means more than cars and cell phones. In her Atlantic article, she claims to have taken Thoreau's novel personally and began her journey to find herself through this way of life. She figured that the ice-cold Kantishna Hills of Alaska would be the perfect place to test her theory. Staying in a tiny cabin with no electricity or running water, Severin said that the experience was terrifying, yet eye-opening. She faced many difficulties since she had no survival experience. She claims that if it had not been for Walden and other survival stories, she would have given up. These authors urged her to see deeper than the difficulties of this lifestyle and to appreciate nature. Personally, after reading Thoreau's novel, I received the same message as Severin. She claims that after this awakening, she no longer felt terrified, but euphoric. She regained her strength and will, and did what was not only necessary to survive, but things that she began to enjoy doing. To this day, she still lives in that same cabin. It is clear to see that she had developed an appreciation for the gift of nature, and although hard to see at first, nature can provide a quality of life that society never could come close to. Whether it is pride in one's ability to survive or thankful for what God has given us in nature. So, knowing all this information is less actually more. In my eyes and in the eyes of these people, yes it is. To most of the population, it is not. I agree with Thoreau that it could very well be the downfall of humanity. The major points that I got out of this novel and reading these articles is that nature is something to be appreciated and trusted. It is here as a gift for us to cherish, not abuse, yet we are so close to losing nature altogether. That would be an absolute tragedy in the eyes of the ones who truly know nature and depend on it to survive. Our basic necessities might be limited, but they provide us with what we need to not only survive, but to achieve the maximum quality of life that this earth we have been given can provide.